Chapter 8 in Dookie, Sookie, and Big Mo. Flowers for the Spirits. Little Dookie was growing bigger every day. No father was ever more devoted to a daughter than was Big Mo to the little girl. He played with her and laughed with her and talked and sang to her. In turn, she smiled and laughed for him, clung to him, and depended on him. During the long evenings, Mo spent much time carving little wooden dolls for her to play with. They were queer creations with funny faces, but Dookie thought they were wonderful. One day, as she sat on the floor playing with a coconut, it slipped from her hands and rolled across the floor. She looked at it for a moment, then rolled over on her stomach and started to go after it. Mo took a step to help her, but then he stopped. Like little spindly legs, she must learn to help herself. Keeping her eyes on the coconut, Dookie wiggled and worked her way across the floor until she could touch the big oval with her hand. Then it rolled on a little farther. Dookie put her head down on the floor. She was disappointed because she had failed. Try again, little one, said Mo gently. You can do it. Rest a little, then try again. Dookie looked up into Mo's face and smiled. She tried again and soon recovered the coconut. With a smile of triumph on her little brown face, she held the coconut firmly in both hands. Good girl, said Mo, praising her for her efforts. You did it all by yourself. For many days, Mo watched Dookie's efforts to crawl. Then one morning, something happened that caused Mo big concern. While Dookie was interested in her toys and dolls on the mat, Mo stepped out the door for a few moments. When he returned, he found that Dookie had crawled over to the fireplace in the corner where the kettle of rice was cooking. The little girl saw a few grains of rice on the edge of the kettle, and with her little chubby hands, she was reaching for them. In order to steady herself, she put her hand down on one of the hot stones, and it burned her. At that moment, Mo came in the door. Seeing what was happening, he said, No, no, Dookie, hot, hot! The shock of the burn and the quick, harsh words of the only person she knew and loved were more than the little girl could take. Her lips quivered and her eyes looked up searchingly into Big Mo's face, and then she put her head on the floor between her hands and sobbed. The burn on her hands hurt, of course, but what hurt more was that Big Mo had used a harsh tone of voice to her. She could not understand. Mo gathered her up in his arms and looked at her hands. It was not a bad burn. While he applied some oil, he spoke words of tenderness to her. Then he sat on the mat and held her close to him. He sang to her, but she continued to sob. When she looked up at his face, there was fear and distrust in her eyes. Mo had not intended to scold her. He had not wanted any harm to come to her. He loved her so much. Then a sudden fear came to him like a stab of a knife. What if the spirits were angry and would take her away from him because he had scolded her? With a suddenness that startled Dookie, Mo leaped to his feet. Taking some coins from the jar on the shelf, he ran down the stony path toward the village. Dookie stopped crying and looked up at him questioningly. This was strange and unexpected. Where were they going so fast? And there's a picture of Dookie and Big Mo running down the path to the village. What's going on? When they came to the village, Mo hurried to the market and bought a large bouquet of flowers. Then he ran across the clearing to the spirit tree near the road. On the shrine, he placed the flowers. mumbling the queer incantations of the charm doctor as he stood there afraid and sorrowful. Dookie held out her small hand. She wanted the pretty flowers. Why leave them there? Big Mo held her close as he walked slowly back up the hill path. He breathed a big sigh. He hoped he had appeased the spirits. I'll never scold her again, he promised. Never, never. Dookie had forgotten all about the hurt. The fast ride to the village and the pretty flowers had made her trouble disappear. Even the burn on her hand did not hurt any more, for she was assured that Big Mo still loved her. Our next chapter, Trinkets and Charms.